let's pass over to Liv. Now, Liv is in the UK. Liv is has done work in Borneo, and she's doing work with bearded pigs. I'd love to hear about this research. For those of you that don't know, while we went through COVID and the challenges that enabled, the bearded pigs in Borneo also had a pandemic called African swine flu, which is wiped out expected around half of the bearded pig population. Now that's the figures I know, but I'm sure that Liv's going to give us a little bit more detail than that. So welcome, Liv.
Just try and share my screen. Hold on.
Yes, feel free. Do you know how to do that?
Yep, let me just.
If you just scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a green button.
Yeah, just my presentation ready. Hold on.
So while you're doing that, Liv, I might tell everyone how we met. Well, because we haven't met in person, but because I wrote Wildlife Wong and the Bearded Pig, Olivia read that in the UK, and there's a map there about the migration of bearded pigs. And so she actually contacted me and said, where did you get that? Where did that research come from? Which made me feel super special. So thank you very much, Olivia, for doing that. And then she was kind enough to agree to share some of her research and citizen science projects. So here we go. We're ready.
So I work for Imperial College. And yeah, this is just a little presentation I put together about African swine fever and how it's affected the pigs of Borneo. I should warn you, there are a few pictures of dead pigs in the presentation, so I'll just let you know in the slide before in case you don't want to look. Now I'll give you a brief history of African swine fever. It's a highly contagious viral disease of pigs. It can cause up to 100% mortality, and there's currently no vaccination and no cure. The virus can be spread by direct contact between sick and healthy pigs, or indirectly through their bodily fluids or through eating infected meat. So it can survive for months on uncooked pork products. It can even survive freezing and cooking at low temperatures. It survives on surfaces, so on clothes, on the wheels of vehicles, and it can be carried by some ticks as well. The virus was first described in Kenya in 1921. It remained on the African continent until 1957, where it reached Europe, South America, and the Caribbean. They actually managed to contain this outbreak and eradicate it from outside of Africa by the mid-90s. But a second transcontinental spread occurred in the country of Georgia in 2007. And from here, it spread across Europe and into Asia. This map, it's got from a paper published in Animal Frontiers, and it was published in January 2021, so it shows the global spread there. And I know here it does show that it's in Indonesia and Borneo, but I think they've just coloured in all of Indonesia because I think it was in Sumatra before then, but it hadn't actually reached Borneo when this paper was published. So in August 2020, Dr. Matthew Luskin submitted a paper to a scientific journal called Conservation Letters, and he was highlighting the imminent risk of African swine fever spreading into Southeast Asia's wild pig populations. So there are a high number of islands, as we all know, in Southeast Asia, which have endemic pig populations, which would be high. We didn't know if they'd be highly susceptible to the disease, but evidence showed that it affects all types of pig. So he submitted the paper in August 2020. And by the time it was published in early 2021, the virus had reached Borneo. So a little bit about bearded pigs. So these are the pigs that are native to Borneo, Sumatra, and Peninsular Malaysia. The IUCN Red List currently has them listed as vulnerable with a decreasing trend. This is mainly attributed to habitat loss and fragmentation as well as hunting. So there are two subspecies. There's Sus barbatus barbatus, which is found on Borneo and on Peninsula Malaysia, and Sus barbatus oi, which is found on Sumatra. The bearded pigs are termed ecosystem engineers or gardeners of the rainforest. They're really a keystone species. They have their habits of rooting in the soil, which sort of aerates the soil and also upturns insects and things. They're often followed by birds, which like to eat what they dig up. They also predate on a lot of seeds. They also disperse the seeds, and they bend saplings to make nests. And they also, they're scavengers, so they eat anything they come across on the forest floor, any dead animals, including dead pigs. And they are important prey items for clouded leopards. And according to this picture in the mammal book of Borneo, for blood pythons as well. I'm not sure anyone's validated that, but it was a good picture. They've evolved over thousands of years with the ditchcarp trees that dominate the rainforests. They've got strong links between the tree masting cycles and the pig breeding cycles. And there are historic accounts of mass migrations of the pigs moving across the island with hundreds of animals. These are becoming less and less common and haven't been observed for a few decades. So I think the next slide does contain images of dead pigs. So they're of huge cultural importance. They're an important food source for many indigenous non-Muslim communities in Borneo. Historically, they were the most hunted mammal in Borneo, with a history going back 35,000 years. By many indigenous communities, they were the preferred meat, accounting for between 54 and 97% of the wild meat consumed by some communities. In Sarawak alone, it was estimated that 1 million pigs were harvested a year. Their meat provides a vital protein source to these communities, especially in areas where the ancestral forests have been converted to oil palm plantations. And bearded pig meat is also central in many cultural celebrations, such as weddings and birthdays. And in some cultures, they are thought to play a symbolic role as a mediator between man and the spirits that regulate access to forest resources. So the first case of African swine fever in Borneo were in Sabah, in the northeast of Malaysian Borneo. The first reports came of bearded pig carcasses being discovered, and that was in December 2020. So these continued into January, and African swine fever was confirmed as the cause of the deaths in February 2021. It continued to spread with reports of forests stinking of death and the absence of pigs where once they'd almost been considered as a pest. It spread to people's backyard, sort of semi-domestic pet pigs, and into commercial pig farms in February 2021. So in response, all hunting licenses for bearded pigs were suspended in Sabah. The selling of wild pig meat was prohibited. An African swine fever disease crisis management committee was set up, in commercial farms where infections occurred had to destroy all their animals and dispose of them in accordance with guidelines. The farms were thoroughly disinfected. There has also been large-scale culling of domestic pigs to try and curb the spread. However, any action to try and mitigate the spread in bearded pigs, and even to gather more data on the extent of mortalities, was compounded by another virus, which was COVID-19, and everywhere was going into lockdown, so it was very difficult to actually get any data. So in response, here at Imperial College, in April 2021, we decided to create the Babi Hutan project. So Babi Hutan is the Malay name for bearded pigs. It literally translates as forest pig. The project was set up with support from the Wildlife Department of Sabah and Sabah Veterinary Service. So it's just a citizen science project that requested any information from members of the public, scientists, NGOs, anyone and everyone, to ask them to report any sightings of bearded pigs, dead or alive. So we have a Facebook group, a website, and a WhatsApp hotline for people to report sightings of pigs. We produce posters in English, Malay, and Indonesian requesting people to report. We also gathered as much information from news sources and international websites that monitor disease, such as the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, or FAO, and the World Organization for Animal Health. And bringing all the data we collated together, you can see this is where African swine fever was first observed. So that is in northeast Sabah, Malaysian Borneo. And then you can see how it travelled south and then west, reaching the west coast in Kalimantan in just roughly a year after it was first observed. So on this map, we've highlighted the different districts and regions with the colour coordinated for the month of arrival, and where we've got actual pinpoint locations of where animals were observed, dead animals were observed, we've got those as well. So the pigs, bearded pigs are with circles, domestic pigs are triangles, and where the type of pig wasn't reported, it's a diamond shape. So you can see we only really have bearded pig information, actual point information for Sabah. We're not sure whether the diamond, which type of pig the diamond one. I suspect they probably were domestic pigs. That was from a website in Indonesia that was tracking the spread. I've got a couple of graphs here that we've made from our data. So this first graph shows Sabah, pigs in Sabah from December 2020 to December 22. It shows how there appeared to be a first wave in African swine fever mortalities in bearded pigs between when they were first observed in December through to about July, and then a second wave in domestic pigs a little later on, starting about October 21. So the World Organization for Animal Health in Sabah reported 74 outbreaks of African swine fever, with the latest one in October 2022. The second graph looks at the rate of spread across Borneo. So this was done by plotting the distance from the first observation and the number of days since the first observation. So from this, we can determine that the disease was spreading at first at about 2.5 kilometers per day. So by the end of 2021, it seemed that bearded pigs had all but disappeared from Sabah. And we have anecdotal reports that the situation was similar in Sarawak, where Indigenous communities have recently reported not seeing a bearded pig in almost 3 years. So as well as having a significant impact on food security, resulting in alternative food, wild meat sources being sought, such as pigtail macaques and samba deer, the ecological effects are starting to be felt and will continue to be felt for years to come. So I was in Sabah in October last year and talking with our research assistants who've worked there for many years. They said there's a lot more sapling survival. So the seeds from the ditchcarp trees are definitely more of them seem to be surviving. And I spoke to another lady who researches dung beetles, and she said that they've noticed that the size of the dung beetles have actually decreased their body size, and they are thinking that's possibly due to the decrease in bearded pig dung that's no longer available to them. However, mortality for bearded pigs has not been 100% on Borneo, fortunately, and we are starting to receive reports and evidence of the return of pigs. So we've seen people have sent pictures of footprints and dung that they've spotted, and we're starting to get pictures on camera traps that people are sending through that they're starting to come back in some places. In July 2022, our project, the Babi Hutan project, was selected as a finalist in the Conservation Optimism Southeast Asia Awards, and we're currently working on a scientific publication. So our next steps are continuing to collect data of live pig sightings, and ideally it would be great if money could be raised to actually capture some of the pigs that are returning, and take blood samples to try and determine whether the pigs that have survived have done so because they're resistant to the virus or because they've just evaded infection. And it would also be a good idea to collect any ectoparasites such as ticks to see if those could be acting as vectors. Finally, we'd recommend that the IUCN Red List status should be urgently re-evaluated. We're cautiously optimistic that if another infection of African swine fever doesn't occur, and the hunting bans that are in place continue, and that they're observed, that the bearded pig numbers will start to increase again, and hopefully they can resume their work as the gardeners of Borneo's rainforests. So I'd like to say a few thank yous. So Sue Peng Hyun, she deserves a very big thank you. She is instrumental in helping set up the Baby project, in collecting a lot of data and contacting lots of people, manning the WhatsApp hotline, and just doing so much work. So she's been amazing. And also Professor Ewers, whose lab I'm part of at Imperial, and Dr. Peter and Dr. Sen from the Sabah Veterinary Service and Wildlife Department, who supported our project. And also thank you for all the people that have shared observations. That, you know, couldn't have done it without them. These are the references I've used for the talk. And yeah, please let me know if you've got any questions.
Well done, Liv. That was quite comprehensive. Thank you. Thank you. I've learned a great deal there. I mean, and I'm sure everyone else has. It's good to see it all in one presentation, because you get little tidbits of information, and to put it all together, I've really learned a lot. Thank you.